Hello and welcome to the UK Touring Car Series and round 6 from Knockhill. In pole position for the first race of the evening we have Fulvio Phoenix. Alongside him is Dan Rock in another BMW. Steve Legale is in third, Malcolm Hutchin is in fourth, Paddy Breslin qualified fifth, Roy Magnus qualified sixth, and in seventh position in the only qualifying session of the day is Scott Deakin in the Infinity. Right, so we're about to start the first race of 3 of the evening, of the day. And off to a good start from pole position is Fulvio Phoenix. He's way clear of everybody else. A little bit of a touch between Hutchin and Legale in the background. It seems like everybody is settling down into position. Magnus has gone past Paddy Breslin in the background there for, what is it, fifth position. Yep. Lap 3 then, we're following Steve Legale, who is also following Dan Rock, who had a slow exit over the crest. And here comes Legale on the inside into the hairpin. Had a great run, and that's a clean move. Oh, but does Malcolm Hutchin follow through in the Vauxhall in behind? No, it doesn't quite have the momentum coming out of the corner. Lap 6 and we're following Legale again and over the crest at the chicane and runs wide. Oh, he still retains his third position, coming back onto the or second position rather, coming back on the road. Magnus off in the background, but here comes Hutchin. Malcolm has a great exit out of the crest. Oh, and to the inside of Legale. Has already passed Rock and passed Legale as well, and here comes Magnus on the inside as well. So that's 2 positions for both Malcolm Hutchin in the Vauxhall and Roy Magnus in the Cupra. Oh, and Magnus tries to sneak up on the inside of Hutchin at the end there, but can't quite do it. So we're following on board with Magnus then through all of this. We have Legale off in the gravel trap. He loses a bit of momentum, and so does Dan Rock over the crest. That opens up the gap for Hutchin on the right. Malcolm squeezes to the inside of Steve there. A little bit of a touch on the corner exit, and that opens up the door wide for the Cupra behind. As we could see, Magnus was actually challenging quite hard, but Hutchin just had more pace on the outside. So lap 13 then, and both Hutchin and Magnus has pulled away from the guys behind. Oh, and Hutchin up on 2 wheels. Touch the curbing on the inside, and Roy Magnus says thank you very much and goes up into second position. Oh, and and Dan Rock goes off in the background into the gravel, comes back onto the road ahead of Steve Legale, and he consolidates his position. Right then, at the end of race 1, Fulvio Phoenix wins 18 laps, 14 seconds ahead of Roy Magnus. Malcolm Hutchin in third, Dan Rock in fourth position, Steve Legale in fifth, Paddy Breslin in sixth position, and Scott Deakin in seventh position is 1 lap down. And the way we finish race 1 is the way we're gonna start race 2. So Fulvio Phoenix then in pole position ahead of Roy Magnus, Malcolm Hutchin in third, Dan Rock starts fourth, Steve Legale starts fifth, Paddy Breslin starts sixth, and then Scott Deakin starts seventh. Once again. Right, who will be following this time? Is it Legale? Yeah, look at Steve, has a good start compared to Malcolm Hutchin up ahead. A great start by Magnus as well up in the Cupra. Oh, and Steve moves Dan Rock out of the way as Magnus has taken the lead. Gone around full with Phoenix. Oh, but it's a big slide. Oh, now onto the gravel as well. Big spin, and here comes Phoenix. Oh, and that's unfortunate. Both the guys in the front is out. Oh, and Phoenix collects Legale as well as he tries to rejoin the race. Sorry, and he's waiting for Legale to get back going. And out of all of that, Malcolm Hutchin is the big winner, going straight up into first position with Breslin in second and Deakin in third. Speaking of Paddy Breslin, we are on board with him here from the start. We can see Legale. Well, first Hutchin is jumping over the curbing on the inside, and Legale just punts Dan Rock off to the side, and Steve pulls off then and waits for Dan Rock to get back past, and we have the kerfuffle between Magnus and Phoenix there into the gravel rather. Right, lap 5 then. This is Scott Deakin versus Paddy Breslin into the hairpin. Oh, and Deakin. Scott gives a big touch to the rear bumper of Paddy there in the middle of the corner, or in the exit of the corner rather. So both Dan Rock and Roy Magnus gets through, and he also stalls the engine, thus the poor Scott Deakin. But here comes Steve Legale to the rescue, because there is no starter button, or the starter button doesn't work for Scott Deakin, but Legale comes around and gives him a bump start, and can both continue to drive. Right. Roy Magnus then, working his way up from last position into lap 10 now, and he's got a good run on Dan Rock up towards turn 1, and cleanly through, and Dan leaves the door open there. He sees the attack is coming, and he opens up the door. And speaking of open doors, this is Breslin opening up the door for Fulvio Phoenix then into the hairpin. Fulvio with a good run over the crest and was well past coming into the hairpin. And we're about to see the same move again, I think, lap 16. This is Phoenix on Dan Rock for third position in the race. Yeah, cleanly through. And Dan doesn't argue the space. Alright then, so Malcolm Hutchin then wins race 2 of the evening. But the gap down to Roy Magnus in second isn't that big, it's 1.6 seconds. Phoenix fights back up into third. Dan Rock falls in fourth position. Then there's a bit of a gap down to Paddy Breslin. Scott Deakin finishes in sixth position, and Steve Legale finishes in seventh. And then we take that result list and we turn it upside down for the grid for race 3 of the evening. Steve Legale in pole position and ahead of Scott Deakin, Paddy Breslin in third, Dan Rock starts fourth, Fulvio Phoenix starts fifth, Roy Magnus starts sixth, and at the rear of the grid in seventh position we find Malcolm Hutchin then. These reverse grid races tend to be quite exciting. Has a good start from Dan Rock from second row on the grid. Tries to sneak through, but he can't. But it seems like everybody's going off on the outside there. Legale, Deakin, Rock and Magnus going wide. And Magnus and Hutchin going side by side in the background. We move forward one lap. This is Malcolm Hutchin in the Vauxhall. Is being shadowed deeply into the corner by Magnus. It seems like Magnus in the Cooper has a good exit. Well on the boost. hybrid boost, yeah, and cleanly through into turn 1. Up onto the rear bumper of Fulvio Phoenix, then he still hasn't made his way past. Oh, but Hudson comes back in the background. Oh, and Breslin goes wide over the crest after the chicane. And that opens up the door for Fulvio Phoenix. Oh, and Dan Rock goes wide in the foreground, and Deacon and Magnus touch in the background. And Malcolm Hutchins says thank you very much, and he goes through. And Magnus on the outside of Breslin, out of the hairpin. Seems to be keeping the momentum a little bit higher than Paddy could do in the Hyundai, and through he goes into turn 1. Lap 4 we're following. Oh, Steve Legale goes wide into turn 1. Very wide, and that opens up the door for Scott Deakin to take the lead, and he does. And Scott has finally found a worked out setup that really suits him with the Infiniti now, and takes the lead. And here comes Dan Rock on the inside of Legale into the crest. Through he goes, but that also opens up the door for Fulvio Phoenix then towards the hairpin. And Malcolm Hutchin and Roy Magnus, everybody's ganging up on Steve Legale now. There we go. Into the hairpin. Looked like Phoenix was passed. Hutchin is passed cleanly. It seems like Magnus has a good run there as well. On board with Roy Magnus on lap 6. This is Hutchin, and he goes off into the gravel. And around and around and around. And stops facing the wrong way. So we're not gonna get Hutchin on the podium then in this race, I think. Lap 7, Fulvio Phoenix, Dan Rock. Dan Rock goes really wide into the hairpin. And that opens up the door. Opens up a big BMW-shaped hole on the inside. There is room enough for Phoenix through there. Oh, it looks like Magnus as well is gonna follow Phoenix through. Yeah, yep, cleanly through into turn 1. That's 2 corners and 2 positions then for Dan Rock. Lap 9 now, and Scott Deakin is in the lead, and well, he was in the lead rather, because that slide sends him backwards through the field. Lap 10, Roy Magnus, high up on 2 wheels. Pretty much exactly the same thing as Malcolm Hutchin did in race 1. But Magnus did lose a lot more time going even wider into the gravel. Now at lap 12 now, this was Dan Rock going off into the gravel in the chicane, or after the chicane rather. That opens up for a big run for Magnus in the Cupra, up towards the hairpin. Good on the boost, and Dan doesn't fight the move too much, and through he goes again. It's the second time Magnus has done that move. So lap 15, we have Breslin high up on 2 wheels over the crest, and that loses him a bit of momentum, and here comes Malcolm Hutchin. He doesn't need a second invitation. Hard on the boost, and passed well before the apex of the hairpin. And through he goes as well. And that is the finish line of the 3rd race of the evening. Fulvio Phoenix then wins 18 laps, 8.9 seconds ahead of Roy Magnus. Dan Rock in 3rd, a couple of seconds behind. Steve Legale finishes the race in 4th position, another 9 seconds down on Dan Rock. Malcolm Hutchin finished in 5th, Paddy Breslin in 6th, and Scott Deakin in 7th, and all of those 3 are covered by just 4 seconds. Right, and that means that the points table look like this after 6 rounds of the UK Touring Car Series. Fulvio Phoenix is in the lead with 277 points. Magnus up at 2nd position with 261. Rock up to 3rd position with 251. Edward Rocket falls down to 4th position because he could not join us for this evening. He's still on 225 points. Hartmut Schwarzberger is in 5th position, 151 points. Steve Legale into 6th position with 131. Paddy Breslin in 7th, 123. Malcolm Hutchin in 8th position, 115 points. Steve Kenwood in 9th position, with 55 points. Scott Deakin sneaking up close behind with 54. Krishnik Halili in 11th position with 32 points, and in 12th position we have Rich Jamerson Smith with 28 points. And that is everything we have for this race meeting rather. So join us in the next one, where we will be doing round 7, and we will return to Donington Park for the GP layout and some interesting weather for that race. So join us again when we're heading to Donington Park. Thank you so much for watching, and until later, bye bye.